with invisible illnesses realize that you can still lead a pretty healthy and active lifestyle. I know this because I did it for a while in spite of all of my health issues. And I'll be real honest. Okay, I'm fidgety, sorry. Everything went to hell about a year ago. But I'm getting back on track, and I'm determined to reclaim. I wasn't the healthiest person a year ago, but I was in a lot better position than I am now, and I need to get back there again. But I tell you, it's astonishing to me how fast a lot of the work that I've done over the years, how fast I undid it. Now, I know most of it'll come back pretty quickly, but this is actually something I thought I had a really good handle on, and I did for several years because I've look, you guys, I've been an emotional eater my whole life. I remember, and this is embarrassing as hell to admit, I remember hiding food as a child. So this is something that's been a huge struggle for me literally my whole life, and I really did have a good grip on it for a while. The good news is, since I've done it before, I know I can do it again, and I'm very familiar with the steps. Excuse me, and I'm ahead of most people because, again, I'm just retracing what I've already done. But let's talk about emotional eating, emotional hunger versus physical hunger. This, I don't know, did I tell you all this is from Dr. Michaela Sarno? Because this is from Dr. Michaela Sarno. She's freaking amazing. Physical hunger is very different than emotional hunger. Physical hunger is a legitimate need for food. It comes on gradually. You will get an uncomfortable feeling in your stomach, right? We all know that. Legitimate hunger, physical hunger, it doesn't have a palate. You just want food. You don't care what it is. And there's no need to stuff. You're just refueling your body, that's all. And there's no guilt or shame associated with physical hunger. Emotional hunger, on the other hand, you're trying to stuff something completely different and you can't. Um, this has a sudden onset. As if you struggle with this, it's that fast, and you're there. You're in that god awful mindset that you get stuck in, and it has a definite palate. Sugary foods, fatty foods. You get a need, and a compulsion to overstuff yourself. Emotional eating almost always leads to feelings of guilt and shame. Well, you know what? We all emotionally eat to some degree. We celebrate with foods. Think about it. You go to a party, what happens? They feed you, right? So we all emotionally eat to some degree. It's when you start trying to use food as comfort. That's when you start running into problems. Some good cues that you might have an issue. Are you turning are you turning to food when you're stressed? Are you eating just because you're stressed? That's a coping mechanism. Are you overeating? Coping mechanism. A poor one. It's a really shitty one, but it is a coping mechanism. If you feel powerless around food, you've got a problem. It's that simple. I have a really good friend of mine, and bless her heart, she's been struggling with drug addictions for a long time. She had the upper hand for quite a while. I was so proud of her, but things happen. People fall off the wagon. But at any rate, um, we were talking about addiction many years ago, and I said, I've got food issues. I've got serious food addictions. And she said, the problem with the food addiction, you can avoid drugs. You can't avoid food. You got to eat. You have to eat to live. That's what makes this such a difficult thing to deal with. Um, you can't turn to food for comfort. It's not going to comfort you. Food's not your friend. Okay? It can't comfort you. It can't make you feel safe. It's a temporary distraction. It solves nothing. All you're doing with this is you're trying to avoid dealing with unpleasant emotions. You're trying to avoid dealing with stress. Problem is, when you emotionally eat, you cause yourself more stress and more unpleasant emotions. And they're not even far down the road. It's a pretty instantaneous, oh crap, why did I do that? What's wrong with me? Why am I so weak? And I had to tell you, with me, it's even more frustrating because if you follow me on social media, you know I'm very devoted to my fitness in spite of having 2 chronic pain conditions. And sometimes it's like, how in the hell I work so hard and I'm so disciplined in that area of my life, but then when it comes to food, it's a whole other ball game. The good news, it is fixable. And I know, because like I said earlier, I had a handle on this for quite a while. So the first step, you have to identify the emotion that's driving your behavior. What do not how you feel after you eat. That's guilty and full of shame and remorse and regret. I know that. But what triggered it? What happened to cause, whether it be anger, grief, guilt, shame? What is that emotion that's making you, driving that compulsion to eat? You need to understand something about emotions, even the really unpleasant ones. They're simply a chemical response in your brain. That's all it is. It's our judgment of our emotions that cause the problem. Excuse me. Shame, when it comes to all addictions, shame is a very powerful emotion, and it drives most addictions. And Dr. Michaela, by the way, is an addiction expert. Um, but it does drive most addictions. It's very common and it's very powerful. So maybe shame is it for you. So step number 1, you've identified shame is what you're trying to stuff. Number 2, you're going to have to sit down and do some work here. You're going to have to figure out where does that emotion come from? What's driving that? This probably means going back to something from your childhood that may have even seemed, this is what gets so crazy, it may have seemed pretty insignificant at the time. What do I mean? Well, one of my mentors uses an example. When she was a little girl, she overheard her parents talking about money. They weren't fighting, but they were having a conversation that the kids weren't supposed to hear about how tight money was. It wasn't a bad conversation. It wasn't even directed at her, but just because of the way the human mind works, that really sat with her. And for years, she was working ridiculous hours because she didn't feel that she had any value unless she was making money. So whatever, that you could have something that happened that seemed, when you look back, you're like, God, that's so insignificant. That couldn't be it. But you know what? If that's the first time you remember feeling that emotion, that's it. Don't judge yourself on this stuff, okay? Because how you feel is how you feel. And especially when you're looking back to things that are really old, when you're going back to your childhood, you can't judge it from today's perspective because you literally didn't have the coping skills as a child. That's part of being a child. But you've got to identify this old emotion. Why? Because old emotions are going to continue to drive that impulsive behavior until they are addressed. And obviously, I'm here to tell you that this can be an ongoing process. But you're going to have to do the work if you want to solve this stuff. Side note, there's no substitution for a good therapist. I'm just putting that out there. But so now you've identified the emotion. You've identified the source of the emotion. Now here's the money one. Here's the big one. Number 3, just delay your gratification. That's it. Just reschedule. Tell yourself, okay, something happens, brings up guilt. Maybe guilt's your thing. Something happens, it brings up those memories. You start down that road. You want to go eat a freaking whole cheesecake. Okay, give it 30 minutes. Just tell yourself in 30 minutes or an hour or whatever time limit you want to put on it, it's got to be, enough of a break to let you calm down. 30 minutes, I'll have the cheesecake. And when that 30 minutes pass, if you still want to eat the cheesecake, eat the freaking cheesecake. If you still want to eat the whole cheesecake, do it. And do it without guilt. Why? Because you have just taken your power back. You are not a victim to your emotions. You are not being swept along by that emotional reaction. You have taken that time, that emotional step back. taking a few deep breaths. Okay, 30 minutes have passed. I still want the freaking cheesecake. Then eat it. Eat it in good health. Eat it with absolute enjoyment. Look, none of this, you don't want to ever feel like you're depriving yourself because you're dealing with emotional eating. You know, that doesn't help. It doesn't help anything. So just delay it. That's all. It sounds really small and simple, but you know what? A lot of times it's the small, simple things that have a profound impact. So, quick recap: physical hunger. It's a gradual onset. It's a legitimate, uncomfortable feeling in your stomach. It has no palate. And it doesn't, you don't feel guilty afterwards because you're just feeling your body. That's it. Emotional hunger, usually very sudden, has a very definite palate. Um, and it leads to guilt or shame. And shame is usually what drives most addictions. You need to understand what's going on here. You need to understand that you're just trying to avoid things that you don't want to deal with. That's all it is. Food can't, it's not going to solve any of your problems. In fact, it's just going to cause you more problems down the road. So to fix it, first you have to identify the emotion that's driving the impulse to eat. You don't worry about we all know how you feel after. What's driving that impulse? So identify what the emotion is. Identify when you first remember feeling that emotion. That's what's driving this response. And then finally, just delay it. Just delay it. Wait 30 minutes, wait an hour. You will be amazed at how empowered you feel. Giving yourself that choice, it's going to drastically reduce the anxiety and the stress you feel about the impulse to eat. And it'll probably really help with the impulse because you are literally taking that emotional step back that we all need. Anyway, I said I was going to do 30 days in a row, and today is day 29. Gosh dang it, I cannot believe I've already done 29 days. Although this is going to end up being 31 days in a row because my schedule here on out will be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That being said, I'm out of here. I hope you'll have a great afternoon, and I will be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock Alaska time. Oh, by the way, please follow me on whatever platform you're viewing this on. I broadcast this out to several different platforms, and oh crap, and I still haven't figured out the chat thing yet. I need to do that.